Then Imam al-Tahawiyyah rahimahullah continued, وَاللَّهُ يَغْضَبُ وَيَرْضَى لَا كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْوَرَى. He said, and Allah becomes angry and becomes pleased, but not like anyone from the creation. And Allah becomes angry and becomes pleased, but not like anyone from the creation. Shaykh Fawzan, Hafidhullah, said, from the attributes of Allah the Mighty and Majestic, al-fi'liyyah, as-sifat al-fi'liyyah, from the attributes of Allah the Mighty and Majestic, which are actions, is that He becomes angry and becomes pleased. يَغْضَبْ وَيَرْضَى. He said, He, the one free of all imperfections, said, وَالسَّابِقُونَ الْأَوَّلُونَ مِنَ الْمُهَاجِرِينَ وَالْأَنصَارِ وَالَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. Surah At-Tawbah, the 9th surah, ayah 100, with the explanation, and the first and foremost from the Muhajirin and the Ansar, and those who follow them upon good, Allah is pleased with them, and they are pleased with Him. The Shaykh Fawzan said, so Allah becomes pleased with His servants. He, the Most High, said, وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. Surah At-Tawbah, the same surah, the 9th surah, ayah 72, with the explanation, and pleasure from Allah is greater. He said, and He, the Most High, said, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ. Surah Al-Fath, the 48th surah, ayah 18, with the explanation, Allah was pleased with the believers when they gave you the pledge, when they gave you, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the pledge beneath the tree. Bay'atul Ridwan, the pledge at Hudaybiyah. Allah was pleased with the believers when they gave you the pledge beneath the tree. Then Shaykh al-Fawzan said, and likewise, He, the Perfect and Most High, becomes angry. قُلْ هَلْ أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِشَرٍّ مِّن ذَلِكَ مَثُوبَةً عِنْدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ لَعَنَهُ اللَّهُ وَغَضِبَ عَلَيْهِ. Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th surah, ayah 60, with the explanation, say, shall I not inform you of something worse than that with regard to the recompense from Allah? Those He has cursed and is angry with. Shaykh Fawzan said, so Allah becomes angry with those who disobey Him, and He detests him. Allah becomes angry with the person who disobeys Him, and He detests him. قُتُهُ. And Shaykh Fawzan said, and al-maqt, detesting, is stronger than hating. And he said, He, the Most High, said, وَمَنْ يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمْ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. Surah An-Nisa, the 4th surah, ayah 93, with the explanation, and whoever kills a believer deliberately, then his due recompense, if he receives it, is hellfire, remaining in it. And Allah is angry with him, and has cursed him, and has prepared a tremendous punishment for him. And just as a side point with regard to explanation of this ayah, because obviously this is connected to another point of a major point of belief of the people of the Sunnah with regard to commission of major sins. Then some of the explainers of the ayah, they make clear that with regard to this ayah, that we do not hold, for certain we do not hold the saying of the Khawarij, that commission of a major sin on its own, just committing a major sin, means that the person will be in the hellfire forever. We don't say that. And that's why Imam al-Tabari, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, when he explained this ayah from Surah An-Nisa, ayah 93, he mentioned different sayings in that regard. And he said in conclusion, and the most correct saying in that regard is the saying of those who said, it means, whoever kills a believer deliberately, then his due punishment, if he is given it, I mean his due punishment, the punishment that's due upon him, if Allah chooses to give him that punishment, is hellfire, remaining forever in it. However, Allah pardons and bestows His favour upon the people of Iman, those who are believers, those who have Iman in Him and His Messenger. And He does not give the punishment to such a person of remaining forever in the fire. Rather, He, the Most High, in renown, either He pardons that person with His favour and does not enter him into the fire at all, or either He enters him into it and then brings him out from it by the favour of His mercy. In other words, mean with regard to a believer, if the person who does that is a believer, then either one of those two results. Then back to the explanation of Shaykh al-Fawzan, Hafidhahullah, then he said, having established the point that Allah becomes pleased, yarda, and Allah becomes angry, yaghdab, he said, and the created being becomes angry and becomes pleased. I mean people become angry also, and people become pleased. And there is no resemblance between the anger and pleasure of the created being and the anger and pleasure of the Creator. There's no resemblance between the anger or pleasure of a person. There's no resemblance between that and between the anger or pleasure of Allah. He said, the pleasure of Allah and His anger are as befit Him, He the Perfect. And the pleasure and anger of the created being are as befit Him, just like the rest of the attributes. In other words, that Allah the Most High becomes angry, becomes pleased, as befits Him. And the creation, they become angry or become pleased, as befits them as being created and deficient and so on. The Shaykh said, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. The ayah bringing the great principle in this regard, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Surah Ash-Shura, the 42nd surah, ayah 11. With the explanation, there is nothing like Him. There is nothing like Allah. And He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. Shaykh al-Fawzan said, so there is none like Him with regard to His self, nor with regard to His names, nor with regard to His attributes. And even though He has names and attributes, and the creation have names and attributes, yet there is no resemblance. In other words, in this regard, even though Allah becomes angry and becomes pleased, and the creation become angry and become pleased, there's no resemblance between the anger and pleasure of the Creator and the anger and pleasure of the creation. There's no resemblance. Shaykh al-Fawzan said, this is the position of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. They affirm al-Rida, they affirm pleasure, and al-Ghadab, anger for Allah, the Mighty and Majestic. and other attributes. They affirm these two attributes and the other attributes. And even though such attributes are found in the created beings, however, along with the difference, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. The same ayah, Surah Shura, 42nd Surah, ayah 11. That there is nothing like Him, there is nothing like Allah, and He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. The Shaykh said, so likewise the created being, the person, is hearing and seeing. And Allah said about Himself, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. The same ayah, and He, Allah, is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. And He said at the start of the ayah, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing, with the explanation, there is nothing like Him. So that shows that there is a difference between the attributes of the creation. He said that shows there's a difference between the attributes of the Creator and the attributes of the creation. This is something known from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the creed and belief of the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Then he said, moving on to refute those people of the false saying, some of the people of the false sayings in this regard, he said, as for the people of ta'wil, as for the people of false interpretation, ta'wil, and misguidance, then they negate the names of Allah and His attributes. Because such attributes are found in the created beings. He's quoting what they say. Why do they negate certain names from Allah, and why do they negate certain attributes from Allah? He said, because they say that such attributes are found in the created beings, and if a person were to affirm them, it would mean resemblance upon his claim. That's what they claim. The Shaykh said, but in reality it does not necessitate resemblance. For indeed this understanding is futile. In other words, just as the Shaykh mentioned before, that just as Allah is the hearing, the seeing, and the fact that the creation of hearing and seeing as well, it does not in any way mean resemblance. For indeed, the hearing and seeing of the creation does not resemble the hearing and seeing of the Creator. So this argument of theirs is futile. The fact that they say certain attributes of Allah, we find attributes in the creation, so therefore we can't affirm that attribute for Allah. This is a futile argument. And then the Shaykh mentioned what do they do as a conclusion of this argument. He said, they do ta'wil. Based upon this, they do ta'wil. They misinterpret al-ghadab. They misinterpret anger to mean al-intiqam, to mean taking vengeance. That's what these people say about the attribute of ghadab, Allah's anger. They say what it means is He's taking. They say it doesn't really mean anger, it means taking revenge. He said, and they misinterpret al-rida, pleasure, to mean al-in'am, bestowing favours. So in other words, they say that Allah does not really become pleased. Rather, it's a way of saying that He bestows favours. This is their false and futile argument. Then the Shaykh said, but rather what is obligatory is to submit to Allah and to His Messenger, and to what is established from them, and that the person leaves aside these vain and foolish sayings. And then he finished with the paragraph saying, and when Imam Malik, when he was asked about how is Allah's ascending over His throne, he lowered his head out of fear and sense of shame from Allah. Then he raised his head and he said, al-istiwa'u ma'loom wal-kayfu majhul wal-imanu bihi wajib was-su'alu anhu bid'ah. When someone came to Imam Malik rahimahullah and asked this question, how does Allah ascend? Imam Malik, when he lowered his head out of shame before Allah and out of fear, and then when he responded, he said with this famous saying, the ascending is something known, and how is unknown, and believing, having iman in it, is obligatory, and asking about it is bid'ah, is an innovation. In doing what the person did, asking how is that attribute, is a bid'ah, innovation. And that's where Shaykh Fawzan, Hafidhullah, ends explanation of this point. And just something very briefly, that Shaykh Al-Albani, Rahimahullah, he made the same point with regard to the refutation of those people of Ta'wil, those people who twist, misinterpret Allah's attributes to mean something else. And Shaykh Al-Albani said in his small notes, with regard to the point of At-Tahawiyyah, Rahimahullah, وَاللَّهُ يَغْضَبُ وَيَرْضَى لَا كَأَحَدٍ مِّنَ الْوَرَى, and Allah becomes angry and becomes pleased, not like anyone from the creation. Shaykh Al-Albani, Rahimahullah, he said, it contains a refutation of the people of Ta'wil, the Mu'attilah. It contains a refutation of those people who misinterpret, interpret away, and those people who negate the attributes from the Ash'aris, from the Asha'ira. Obviously, he mentioned one of the most famous groups of people who commit the sin of Ta'wil, who commit this evil of Ta'wil, being the Asha'ira, the Ash'aris. They're one of the most groups who are most famous for this crime. So he said, it contains a refutation of the people of Ta'wil, those who negate the attributes from the Ash'aris and others. Those who say that what is meant by anger, al-ghadab, and rida, pleasure, means willing to do good to them, or wishing to do good to them. He said, and what is the difference between submitting and accepting the attribute of al-irada, Allah's will? So they affirm for Allah will. They don't affirm that He becomes pleased, they don't affirm that He becomes angry, but they affirm for Him. They say rather it means His willing to do good to the people. So they affirm will for Allah. The Shaykh said, what is the difference between the fact of accepting Allah's will and their denying these two attributes by means of interpreting them away, when they are just the same with regard to the servant also? I mean, the fact that they flee away from affirming that Allah becomes pleased, and they flee away from affirming that Allah becomes angry because they say the people become angry and the people become pleased, so we can't affirm that for Allah. Shaykh say, making the point, then don't the people have will? Do not the people will things? The same argument, and yet they affirm for Allah will. So why then don't they affirm for Allah that He becomes pleased and that He becomes angry, and say, and then the Shaykh continues, Rahimahullah, he said, so would that they had said the same as they said concerning Allah's will, that it is different to the will which the servants have as their attribute, and that each of them has a reality befitting the one who has the attribute. I mean, the servant has real will as befits him, and Allah has real will as befits him. Then he said, and the explainer, Rahimahullah, has explained this fully, so refer back to that meaning, Ibn Abdul Izz, Rahimahullah, in his explanation.